Hey, Chris De Silva here, and this React snack is all about props. So, we talked about state, and state being that information that a component has that can also be changed. And anytime that state changes, that component will re-render on the page. Now, let's say that we want to organize our code a little bit better, and it's maybe our app's getting pretty big, and now we've got 100, 200, 300 lines of code, and it's getting pretty messy. What we can do in a React app is break bigger components into smaller child components. That way, A, our code is more clean, and B, sometimes there are things like buttons, for example, that you want to reuse in different parts of your application. And this way, we can break things out and keep things like style and theme and general look and feel the same while tweaking little things like functionality or maybe text or things like that. So let's take a look. Right now, we've got the button example from the state video. And before we dive back into the code, here's another analogy. So when we're thinking about props, think about properties. That's what they are. They're properties that we're passing down. So this parent dog, think about as a parent component, like our app component. She's going to pass down some information. She's going to pass down some of her properties to her little puppies. So we've got this cutie over here, maybe is a little bit more timid, has that brown color. We've got some little dogs sniffing around over here. We've got some different colors, but they all look pretty much the same, just with some little tweaks here and there with personality or look or things like that. And with React props, it's really similar. We're passing down information, and some of that information may be a little bit different, but these child components, much in the same way like these little puppies, will have little small tweaks here and there, but generally you can tell that they're related. So if we pop back into our app, just a refresher, we've got our dark mode, light mode button. Fancy. All right, so let's say we want to break this button from the parent component. This app is the parent component. Let's say we want to break this button into a child component. Well, here's what we'll do. We're first going to create a new component in our source directory. So wherever app is, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it button.js. I'm going to import React from React. I'm going to say const button equals props. Open up curly braces, return, and then I'm going to have a button that says button in the middle, and I'm going to export default button. Give that a quick save. So just to quickly explain what's going on here, import in React, obviously. So I'm setting a button component that takes in props as an argument. So it'd be the same thing. I could put parentheses around this. I'm choosing not to because it's just one argument here, so you don't need the props. And then curly braces, it's just returning a button, and then I'm exporting that as a default export. So pretty straightforward functional component. Then, in order to see this, I need to import it into my app. So I'm going to go to the top where my imports are. I'm going to say import button from /, because we're in the same source directory, app.js and button.js are in the same folder. I can do /, and then there's my button. Don't have to worry about the .js at the end. It's giving me a warning because I'm not doing anything with this button yet. So I'm going to open a new button component here, and there we see button. So it doesn't do anything yet. It looks a little bit different. It's a little bit smaller. Our dark mode button still works, so that's good. So how do we pass down the information that this button is using in order to make the button have the same information and functionality? Well, what we'll do is we're going to pass down props. We're going to pass down the properties that we want this button component to have access to. And how we do that We'll break this out. And let's say, for example, we want to decide here what the text on the inside is. So we can say text equals, let's say, button text. Super creative. Cool. So nothing changed here yet because we haven't connected anything. So here's how we connect it. Knowing that this property button text is called text, and I could call that whatever. I could call it words, I could call it phrase, whatever I want. I just chose to call it text. In my button component, I'm going to replace this button actual hard-coded text, and I'm going to say, I'm going to open up curly braces, props.text, and now button text. I could change this and say, ha ha ha. And now it changes. So this parent component, this app, is passing down information to the child through props. Now let's say we want to have this this nice bit of padding here. Remember, the padding is coming from this class name, which is BTN. So I could say, we'll call it button class equals BTN. So remember, this part I'm coming up with. I'm just deciding, I want to call it button class just so if somebody else is looking at my code, they're clear on what this BTN means. So I'll give that a quick save. And then in my button component, I'm going to say class name equals, open my curly braces, BTN, props.btn class. And now we can see that that padding has been passed down from parent to child. So it's pretty sweet. One last thing that we can do, we want this button to be able to do something. We want to pass down that click handler. So we have on click on this button. So remember, this is our actual dark mode button that we've coded up already. So we have on click, open my curly braces, we have a function that says toggle is dark, opposite of is dark. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can pass this function down to the child component, this button component. Pass that on click handler down to the child through props. All right, hopefully that wasn't too painful. Here's how I would set this up. So I'm going to just call it click handler equals, and then I'm going to open up my curly braces. My function is going to be toggle is dark, not is dark. So because I'm in the parent component, I have access to this information. So I can still call this function toggle is dark, not is dark, and then I'm going to pass that information down to my button. So I give that a save, and remember, I'm calling this click handler. So now I'm going to treat this button as if I was like, I want to come up with an on click handler for this button. So I'll say on click equals props dot click handler. I save that, and now I click it, and now my ha 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 button still has the same functionality as my dark mode, light mode button. So it's pretty sweet. And so now I could get rid of this, and now I just have my ha 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 button, and that changes the background. Now, one final thing, let's say that I want to change this text. I could just update that here, and I could say is dark, and I could say light mode. If it's not, I could say dark mode. And now this is still passing down those properties through that props.text. So if I click it, now the text changes. So that's how properties work. You're going to get the most out of this by trying it yourself. So maybe you create a new app component and try to create a button, or maybe you do it with a form or an input or something else. But give this a shot and really experiment with passing props from a parent component to a child component. The more practice you get, the more natural it'll come, and that flow will become easier and easier. Nice job, and I'll see you next time.